All right, welcome back to the Business of Cannabis podcast. I'm Michael Zaitsev, Academic Director of Business of Cannabis degree programs at LIM College, and I have a very special guest with me here today, a dear friend and the Director of Policy for the Office of Cannabis Management of New York State, John Kagia. Welcome, thank you for being here. I'm excited to speak with you. First of all, how's it going? I imagine you're an extremely busy man right now working on regulations, and we got the public comment period, so, how's it going? What's it like to be you?
I don't know what it's like to be anybody else right now, but it's been a furious few months. So I joined the Office of Cannabis Management in September, so about 5 months ago now, which feels like both a minute and a lifetime ago. And the pace has been unbelievable. So we've been working furiously on finalizing the regulations, which have just come out of public comment, and we're in the process of reviewing the thousands of comments that we got from the public. Wonderful to see how engaged New Yorkers were. We're working on the next phase of our licensing, so getting more, particularly retailers, licensed and up and running. We're seeing a lot of interest from brands who are trying to figure out how to play in this space and what the rules of the road are going to be. So it's all of the work, all of the things that you need to do to set up a regulated market, and we're dealing with all of it right now. So
Wow.
it's been amazing.
I don't envy you, but thank you for doing that work, man. It's really important. And so, how about you give us like a high-level overview of, kind of level set for folks who might not be as familiar with the New York market as you or I, but where are we at today, and what does the next 6 months, what does the next 12 months look like, if all goes well?
So, we have long said, and for those of you who might not know, I've been working in the cannabis industry for over a decade, and before I joined the office, I spent a lot of time studying cannabis markets globally. And a few kind of observations about the New York market, and part of the reason why I joined the office were because of some of these reasons. So one, New York has the most sophisticated, unregulated cannabis market in the world. Cannabis consumers here are really savvy, they know their products, they have access to very high quality products. There's some great local brands that have been built in the legacy market. And so you've got this kind of really well-established ecosystem for cannabis already existing in the state. Two, we're at a really interesting moment in this transition from unregulated to legal. We know that New Yorkers are already spending $4 to $5 billion on cannabis every year. This is already a massive market. The challenge that we are facing as the office, that the state is facing as we make this transition, is how do you get these consumers who already have high quality, who already have very convenient access to cannabis from the unregulated market into the legal market where you can find safer, tested products, and start capturing that revenue on the government side. Critical to that is going to be opening stores and opening them quickly. So we're working on that licensing process as quickly as we can, even as we try to build out the rest of the supply chain, getting cultivators growing really high quality New York homegrown cannabis, getting processors licensed and operational to produce the caliber of products that New Yorkers expect. And we think this is going to be a phenomenal market for value added products. And also on the enforcement side, making sure that as we're standing up the legal market, we're also addressing the very widespread unregulated market to ensure that for those legacy operators, we have a path by which they can enter the legal market. And for those who choose to stay in the unregulated market, that we have enforcement mechanisms to ensure that it's not creating a competitive situation against the legal market.
Got it. And so with all that said, given where we are today, end of February, we've got 4 stores in the adult use sector opened in New York State. Hopefully we'll see 100 plus more stores before the end of the year. What's kind of the next 6 to 12 months look like as far as not only getting more regs out, we were talking a little bit about consumption lounges and all that off off camera a moment ago. So when can we expect to see, some of those newer regulations come out, and then also some more licenses be awarded?
So I think the next 8 months are going to be really fascinating for New York. We've already issued over 60 retail licenses, and we expect that all of those operators are going to be operational here within the next 6 months. But we're also going to continue to issue more licenses. Our goal was always to issue at least 150 retail licenses as part of the conditional adult use retail program, and we continue to work toward that target. As you may know, we've had this lawsuit that has enjoined 5 regions in the state, so there's 5 sections of the state that we're not able to issue licenses in, but there's nothing stopping us from issuing very quickly the rest of the licenses in the rest of the state. So we expect to see consumer access to legal cannabis expand very quickly over the next 6 to 8 months. 2, we're very excited to have our regulations package fully adopted, and we're expecting that that's likely to happen by the end of the summer. So we're in the first stage of public comment right now. We'll update the regulations, put it out for a second round of public comment, and then once that's done, finally and formally submit them for adoption. Once the regulations are adopted, we'll be able to begin licensing for the full market. So now we can start issuing not conditional licenses, but full licenses for our cultivators, processors, distributors, and retailers. In parallel to all of that, we're also working on some additional licenses that folks are really bullish about. Consumption lounges, one, and we're in one as we speak, which is, I think, an illustration of where this market could go. And 2, delivery licenses, which we think are another area which is going to be really rich for opportunity, and particularly really rich for opportunity amongst our equity applicants. 3rd are the micro-business licenses, another one which we are seeing a lot of excitement about. So micro-businesses are going to allow our operators to grow, process, create their own brands, and sell their own brands. So they'll have the ability to own their entire supply chain. They'll be smaller sized businesses, but it's a true brand building opportunity for the licensees who want that. So it's going to be a very busy 6 to 8 months, but all critical foundational elements to building this market.
And you mentioned this somewhat controversial lawsuit that's enjoined many of the regions of the state, from including my home Brooklyn, from getting some card dispensaries up and running. So is there an anticipated resolution or expectation of when we might see some progress there?
Hard to tell. Obviously a difficult thing to talk about litigation that is in process. However, I live in Brooklyn as well, and when I realized we were in one of the enjoined regions, it was disappointing. However, we think it's important that that if an applicant or anybody else thinks they have a case to present against the office, please, the courts are. This is precisely what the courts and the judicial system is intended for. But we remain hopeful and optimistic that this is not going to be a long-term impediment to this program, and that very soon we will be able to issue or resume licensing in the 5 enjoined regions, and hopefully get a dispensary close to you.
Nice. I'm going to ask another controversial question, which is around the social equity fund, which I'm sure you've gotten a lot of heat for, either directly or indirectly, and it's been in the media. So, any updates on that, or what's the latest in that whole situation?
So, maybe for those who might not be familiar with the Social Equity Fund, the idea was that as part of the legalization process and the market activation process, that a fund would be created that would raise private capital to support the establishment of our first 150 licenses. So as part of the conditional adult use retail dispensary program, CARD, a fund was created and managed by the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, DASNY, which would provide support services to these first 150 licensees to help them get up and running, including helping them identify locations for their retail facilities, helping them with the costs of building out their locations, supporting them with some of the technology solutions that they would need to operate their businesses, and really serve as a partner to get these licensees operational. I can't really speak to the functioning of the fund itself. That's all kind of under the purview of DASNY, not of the Office of Cannabis Management. However, I will say that as it currently stands, our expectation continues to be that the fund is going to continue to work with the licensees on securing locations and getting them up and running. Indeed, we have the first location, the first fund-supported location open with Smacked Village in the village. We expect that the fund is going to continue to raise the capital needed to get to support our cards as we continue the licensing process.
Got it. All right. And let's go back to the consumption lounge conversation, because I'm particularly curious, and I feel like New York is New Amsterdam, right? And everyone always talks about the Amsterdam lounge experience, but I think as a New Yorker, I believe this community has probably some of the most creative, innovative people in the world when it comes to cannabis social experiences and creating amazing spaces like the one we're in today. And so I'm curious, what do you expect? What does the office expect as far as, licensed consumption lounges in New York, not just in the city, but the state and beyond? What might that look like?
So I have to say that this is probably one aspect of the market that I'm most excited about, because I think it's going to be an aspect which New York can really innovate, new opportunities, new approaches to running this kind of business in a way that we haven't seen previously. So there's a couple of dimensions to the idea of social lounges, consumption lounges. One, just given the population density in the state, particularly in New York City, people need places to consume that are not on city streets. I think you can hardly walk now more than a quarter of a block before walking to somebody who's smoking a joint.
I love it. But,
it's part of the
does,
grand revolution, certainly. But I think there's also a lot of people who are consuming on the street because they don't have good alternative spaces to consume. And so I think that's part of the critical function that consumption lounges will serve. But two, really, really bullish about some of the ideas we're already hearing for how people are thinking about incorporating consumption into their spaces. So if we think about the Amsterdam model, most of it is based on almost a coffee shop type approach. You can walk in, buy a cup of coffee, order a joint or an edible, and consume in a fairly kind of standardized experience that looks quite similar to a bar or a coffee shop. I think we are going to see much, much more varied experiences, consumption space experiences in New York, whether that is co-working spaces, so places where you can actually get real work done and consume cannabis safely. We expect we will see kind of sports and fitness environments, yoga studios, Pilates studios, which are cannabis friendly and allow you to consume. We're seeing a lot of interest from businesses upstate in the farming communities who want to do farm tours. I think leaf peeping season, next fall, the fall 2023, cannabis and leaf peeping tours, I think, are just part of the things that we expect to see in this jurisdiction or in this state. And we want entrepreneurs to approach this with that level of creativity. The idea that this isn't just about necessarily pairing or bringing cannabis into an indoor kind of environment, but to think really broadly about what are the types of experiences you can pair with cannabis in that space, whether it's video games or board games, whether it's arts and entertainment, whether it's health and fitness and wellness. I think the sky's the limit, and we want all of those businesses to find a space and a home in New York.
Yeah, wow, sounds great. I'm looking forward to that day.
Just need to get the regulations done, but coming soon to a neighborhood near you.
Nice. What about, I'm going to ask you kind of a self-serving question, my own curiosity of white labeling, where my understanding is because the packaging regs aren't finalized and adopted yet. You know, how's that all going to work when things are kind of settled?
So the packaging regulations are actually almost done.
Right.
We're expecting that they'll be submitted for final adoption or final approval from the board at the next board meeting. So I think on the packaging regulations we're close, and hopefully that will settle a lot of the questions that we've heard from brands who are looking to enter the space and are trying to figure out what their rules for the road are going to be. However, broadly speaking, we are totally open to white labeling in this market. We welcome brands who may be successful in other markets that want to come in and set up their and work here. And indeed, we're already seeing that. I just heard of one of our of a large California brand, a beverage brand that has been able to secure a white label agreement here and has just landed on New York store shelves. So we're totally open to white labeling relationships and opportunities in this market. We are also, while we are obviously very focused on building and ensuring that there's safe space to grow for our local brands. And we're very bullish about the types of brands New York will be able to produce. We also welcome out-of-state brands who want to come into this market. We will just require them to ensure that they're complying with our ownership and business rules when they come to the state.
Got it. And tell me a little about the workforce development side of this thing and all the jobs that are going to be created in New York State, and you know how OCM is supporting, you know, getting people qualified and prepared to be in the industry, not only as entrepreneurs but also as employees, and making a career and a living in cannabis, doing something that's meaningful, and you know, having worker protections that you would enjoy in any other career, and so on.
I've been really excited about the work that the office is doing related to workforce development, and really the work being done to support our entrepreneurs as they're getting up and running. So we have a mentorship program where our kind of candidates can go through and be trained on kind of the 360 aspects of setting up and running a cannabis business. We have this mentorship this kind of workforce development program, which is being set up now as well, which from what I understand, we're probably going to have 250 to 300 people go through the course, and again, learning how to effectively build and scale a cannabis business, run it safely and securely. But there's still a lot more work to be done. I think there's a lot of New Yorkers who don't fully understand or appreciate the scale of opportunity that's going to be created by this industry. And if we think about the idea that New York, all said, is likely going to be a $6 to $8 billion cannabis economy in the first stage of its growth, that's a lot of jobs and a lot of economic opportunity. Two, you know, there are some skill sets that are somewhat specialized to cannabis, and we want to start kind of training our future workforce for these types of roles, which is part of the reason I'm so excited about kind of the education that you're doing with LIM, and the idea that our academic institutions can start to serve as a training bed, or at least as a gateway to introduce future entrepreneurs and the future labor force to the opportunities in cannabis. So we've got some programs in place, and if you're interested, please visit us at the office at ocm.ny.gov, the website where you can find a lot of the information about the programs that we're offering, the trainings that we're offering, and the general information about the growth of this market. But you know, developing the workforce for this industry is going to be critical to the long-term success of this industry. So much more work to do, but very, very bullish.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you one last question, and I'll let you off the hot seat, which is, you know, just personally going from the private sector in cannabis to being a regulator. Well, what's that been like for you, that transition?
You know, talk about the hot seat. I thought I knew what I was signing up for. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, in the best way possible. government has a bit of a reputation for being hyper bureaucratic and very slow moving and hyper indecisive. None of that's been true in my experience. In many respects, OCM has been operating very much like a startup, and I came out of a cannabis startup where very, very agile, immensely engaged team. The team is phenomenally talented, but the pace is unbelievable. If I thought that coming from the private sector, coming to government would be slowing down, that's not been the case at all. But it's been a wonderful challenge, and to see the very real impact of the work that we're doing every day. Every time we go to a retail dispensary opening, every time we have, or we meet with one of our licensees in the supply chain, every time we see a new product hit store shelves, every time we meet somebody from the legacy market who's got a business plan for how they want to come in, it's affirmative of the work we're doing here, and it's been just phenomenal. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and very excited for what's to come.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the work that you and everyone else at OCM is doing. This is a monumental task that you guys have to stand up this market, and I'm glad that we have smart, dedicated people like you working on this. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to come chat with me here on the Business of Cannabis podcast.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Whew. Off the hot seat.
Beautiful.
Thank you.